Zix, the commander of the Galactic Species Categorization Agency, glanced at his empty screen in a horrified manner. For the first time in 16 cycles of flawless service, he had finally committed an error. And it was not just any fault. It was the most significant classification blunder in the history of the agency. Zix chittered uncomfortably, his antenna twitching, and said, "Please validate the current classification status of species identification human." The office was filled with the pleasant voice of an artificial intelligence, and the categorization of humans was such that they posed an exceedingly severe degree of threat from predators. The members of this species are able to endure exposure to a variety of poisonous compounds, such as ethanol and capsaicin, and they frequently take known poisons for the sake of pleasure. Furthermore, they are able to continue functioning after suffering substantial physical damage, and can maintain consciousness even when subjected to extreme gravity. In order to classify it, the following characteristics were taken into consideration. The maximum current confinement procedure. Restricted supervised integration with warning beacons within 50 meters of any human people. Zix's third heart almost stopping. And we classified a whole species as dangerous predators due to the fact that they are almost unkillable. An additional useful addition was made by the computer, which said that humans also exhibit pack bonding behaviors with predator animals, particularly specimens that are categorized as dogs and cats. A disturbing propensity to approach potentially hazardous circumstances without doing an appropriate risk assessment is shown by the conditions, which demonstrate an exceptional resilience to temperature fluctuations. As he sat in his gravity chair, Zix's saddle sagged down. As soon as human characteristics were discovered and documented for the first time, it was presumed that humans were the most powerful predators because of their resilience. Taking into consideration the fact that no non-predator would willingly share its dwelling area with carnivores, this logic made perfect sense. It is unfortunate that this categorization remained, and as a result, the whole galactic community started treating people as if they were walking death machines. He acquired the most current data on human integration and saw that the figures were pathetic. Only a tiny number of humans had been permitted for employment off-world, and he was shocked to see that the numbers were so low. The general sentiment was that the total value of labor resulted from a single research study, in which only 2 people made the list. During the maintenance work, the computer at station GMA-16 displayed video of human designate Pete Thompson, who had been given permission to do certain tasks. Suddenly, the television came to life, revealing a man who seemed to be quite unremarkable, and was dressed in an orange maintenance outfit. During this time, he was adjusting his tool belt while whistling a melody that was called "Don't Stop Believing." Absolutely nothing about him shouted "Apex Predator," unless you include the species he belonged to. The individual who was the subject of the psychiatric examination and background check queried with a level of concern about the possibility that specimen Thompson might do damage to the people who were living at the station. At the time of Zoll's evaluation, it was discovered that the principal danger had a propensity to make what people refer to as dad jokes, which many animals found to be culturally unintelligible. The on-screen individual was seen by Zix et al. Aiding a tiny maintenance drone that had been trapped in a vent. The motions of the on-screen individual were delicate and meticulous, but official sources claim that the individual was able to rescue the drone. The capacity to survive short periods of vacuuming, ingest acidic energy drinks, and recuperate from injuries that would kill the majority of other species is possessed by this monster. There have been 0 reports of actual dangers or aggressive behavior over the past few years. There have been 23 reports of people trying to start social contact by sharing food. There have been 15 reports of people trying to show pictures of their pet predators. There have been 47 cases of people offering assistance when they were asked not to. In addition to sending me all of the information you have about Pete Thompson's planned deployment to Station Gamma 16, I would appreciate it if you could evaluate the classification status of humans for urgent evaluation. I have a feeling that this will be an intriguing case study in human integration, and I would want to incorporate the fact that humans were not dangerous because they were predators. Rather, they were exceedingly difficult to kill. It would seem that people were also pathologically helpful, which was even more alarming from the perspective of the bureaucracy. A sigh escaped Zix's mouth as she saw Pete Thompson instructing a maintenance drone on how to do a fist bump. It would seem that we are going to arrive at the realization that human beings are full of surprises, and maybe even dad jokes. The big bureaucracy should have pity on each and every one of us, due to the fact that Pete Thompson was classified as an extremely dangerous predator that is not at all alert. His first day on Station Gamma 16 was proceeding just as anticipated. He yelled out to yet another hallway that was completely vacant, and the station's internal sensors responded in the appropriate manner. Everywhere he looked, he saw indications of life, but as soon as he rounded a corner, those indicators disappeared. The situation was similar to playing a game of intergalactic hide-and-seek that never ended, with the exception that he was not the target of the game. While he was on his maintenance rounds, the only thing that accompanied him was a little drone that hovered above him and was dispatched to keep an eye on him. In appearance, it seemed to be something that would be produced if you asked a toaster to design a basketball. After being alone for 4 hours, Pete really wanted to engage in some conversation, so he called out to the drone, "Come here." In the midst of consulting his iPad, Pete mumbled something beneath his breath. A failing atmospheric processor in Section C was the next item on the work list to be brought up for attention. In accordance with the instructions, all that was required of him was to replace the quantum filter and reset the gravity settings. As he reached Area C, he was fortunate enough to be receiving a great deal of social contact, but just as he was about to do so, a high-pitched shriek resounded throughout the whole neighborhood. The alien, which seemed to be a cross between a file cabinet and a mantis that hunts prey, had just emerged from the area that houses the processing hardware. The 4 eyes of the creature grew to the size of a dinner plate as soon as it saw Pete there. Pete exclaimed in a vivacious manner, "Hi there!" The alien made a sound that was akin of a frightened dilapidatum before scuttling backwards and snatching a tablet that seemed to be official in appearance. There was a quick clicking and chittering sound coming from the tablet that belonged to Pete Thompson. "This is A.M. Crix, the Junior Assistant Administrator, and I have been given the responsibility of recording you." Warning lights began flashing as the station AI announced that the atmospheric containment breach in Section C area will be sealed in 30 seconds. Pete offered helpful advice, telling Rampage participants to keep at least 50 meters away from the narrow corridor, which could make fixing the processor difficult. This was done as a precautionary measure. Before Crix could react, a loud bang echoed from inside the processor room. This was followed by the distinctive hiss of atmosphere breaking free. The natural color, which had been a refreshing mint green, became noticeably paler. It seemed as though the quantum filter had failed entirely. "We must evacuate and await the implementation of appropriate safety protocols." Pete wasted no time getting to work, rushing past the shocked administrator and into the processor room. There he discovered that the atmosphere was indeed being vented through a crack in the housing of the quantum filter. Warning lights cast an unsettling red light over everything as he swiftly assessed the situation. With only 20 seconds to spare before the emergency sealing, the AI helpfully announced. Pete retrieved his tool belt and, "Oh great, here we go again with the essential emergency equipment, a roll of duct tape." It seemed that Crix had completely forgotten about the 50M rule in favor of their morbid curiosity. The atmosphere is venting into space, and there's nothing that duct tape can't fix. Pete grunted and quickly applied the strips over the crack. "At least, could you pass him the spear filter unit?" Pete, could you pass me a question about the essential emergency equipment? The AI continued its countdown, and it was only 10 seconds until, after what seemed like an eternity, culminating in a masterclass in human emergency repair work, Pete finally sealed the housing and slammed the new filter into place. The warning light went out, and a gentle blue glow indicated that normal operation was taking place. Pete turned around to find Crix staring at him, with all 4 eyes practically bulging out of their sockets. "You exposed yourself to potentially harmful situations. Deadly conditions exist without a risk assessment form, a safety corridor, or even an updated will." Pete, perspiring, shrugged and wiped sweat from his forehead. He reasoned that we would have lost this section if we had waited for paperwork. Besides, humans can endure short periods of vacuum exposure, which may be uncomfortable but is better than filling out forms 3 times. Crick's tablet clattered to the floor, confirming that the legends were true. "You truly are indestructible. All we need now are excellent unions and health insurance. By the way, any chance? Hey, could you show me the way to the cafeteria? I'm always hungry after fiddling with quantum filters." The monitoring drone that had been hiding behind Crix let out an electronic whimper. The cafeteria Crix's mandibles clicked quickly, but there were other species there, eating nutrients defenselessly. Great, Pete perked up. "I love meeting new people, and I brought cookies to share my mom's recipe. Nothing breaks the ice like homemade chocolate chip cookies." Meanwhile, Crix made a note on their tablet with trembling appendages that could be described as human. Crix watched in horror as the specimen displayed classic predatory behavior, attempting to lure prey with processed sugar compounds and, to top it all off, coffee that Pete had brought from Earth. It is important to note that, according to the regulations of the station, coffee could be considered a Class 3 toxin. The drone then passed out, its anti-gravity unit giving out with a sad little, but fortunately Pete caught it before it hit the ground. It was suggested that the classification manuals could use an update. Specifically, they needed a new category for species that were both the most resilient and the most hostile in the galaxy. "I'll take you to the cafeteria." Crix came up with the idea that someone should record what happened next. "But we mustn't make any abrupt movements. Perhaps we should also not bring up the vacuum exposure incident. I still haven't filled out the necessary near-death experience paperwork." Pete smiled as he carefully tucked the unconscious drone under one of... God, a new category was quietly added to the station's threat assessment protocols. It's harmless but horrifying. 3 weeks into Pete Thompson's tenure on Station Gamma 16, someone actually requested human assistance. The reason for this request was that all other options, including prayer, interpretive dance, and filling out Form 27B6, had been exhausted. In cases of extreme technical difficulties, the request was granted. As is customary for problems of this kind, the communications system of the station started out with a series of messages that became more urgent. Notice a tiny fluctuation detected in the major power core. Please maintain your composure and check the emergency instructions that is relevant for your species. Currently, the fluctuation has developed into something that may be considered an issue from a technical standpoint. It is important to remember that yelling is a waste of oxygen and may endanger the stability of the power core. The artificial intelligence of the alarm station would like to remind everyone that they should go to their allocated panic rooms in an orderly manner. Footsteps faint on the wooden floor. Pete was in the middle of instructing Crix on how to play solitaire with a deck of cards when the alerts started. Over the course of the past few weeks, the junior administrator had gradually moved from maintaining a 50-meter safety distance to actually sharing the break room. Despite this, they continued to jump whenever Pete made sudden movements. "Since we should probably check that out," Pete suggested that we gather his cards as the lights flickered in an ominous manner. So Crick's antenna twitched in distress, but according to the emergency protocol, Pete was able to. Once again, the lights flickered, and something far away made a noise that expensive equipment should never produce power. With core stability at 39%, the AI cheerfully announced that they are now accepting applications for positions on the emergency response team. Applicants should include 3 references and their salary expectations. How long does it typically take for qualified crisis response teams to arrive, depending on the processing times of paperwork? The station won't last 3 business cycles, according to Pete, who was already making his way towards the door with his tool belt jingling. Critics protested, citing at least 74 regulations. If you include the recent amendment regarding unauthorized heroics, the number of regulations increases to 75. The station was put back in reserve when the Panamago Ordinance was first written down. They went back to focusing on the heroes. When they reached the power core control room, they found a group of station engineers already there, each one carefully observing the malfunctioning equipment while consulting various manuals and guidelines. In sacred writings maintain power core stability at 32%. The AI-enhanced station's psychological support services would like to remind everyone that existential fear is a normal reaction to the impending catastrophic failure. The chief engineer, a towering being resembling a bioluminescent sequoia tree, noticed Pete and instantly lit up, their glowing patches radiating hope. The human indeed is perfect. It can survive radiation, extreme heat, and potentially complete molecular dissolution. I would rather not put it to the test. Pete mentioned that he was looking at the core's readouts, but he could probably help with the current situation. The chief engineer proceeded to explain the situation in a technical manner, complete with creative sound effects and a lot of hand-waving. In short, the power core's containment field was failing because of a cascade of system errors. In a longer version, they were all severely screwed. Pete asked the engineers, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" This caused one of them to let out a gasp, since it would render the guarantee null and invalid. As they gazed at him in dread, someone else voiced concerns about the paperwork, while a third person expressed dissatisfaction with the power core's stability at 25%. The AI then offered suggestions for station epitaphs, and Pete took a deep breath. He then said, "Listen, we can either follow proper procedures and definitely explode, or we can try something crazy that might work." The engineers gathered for a brief discussion, with their various appendages gesturing animatedly. Eventually, the chief engine ER turned back to Pete and declared an extinction-level emergency, thus invoking Article 7. Pete grabbed the spear off her and stood. She didn't hesitate. According to subsection C of the Emergency Powers Act, normal safety protocols can be temporarily halted in the event that there is an imminent destruction of the entire station, provided that all survivors agree to attend 3 sessions of counseling. For post-traumatic stress disorder, although this seems like something that Crick would benefit from, I am only a junior administrator and am not qualified to handle emergencies that are higher than level 2. This one is obviously a level 87, and no one here will be able to tell you what to do. A meaningful look from him, perhaps, since Crick's words have been humiliating. 20 minutes of what the official report would later call technically innovative solutions leveraging human durability traits ensued, with Pete doing whatever worked as everyone else watched in horror. He bypassed safety protocols, rerouted power through systems that weren't meant to handle it, and even used his own body as a conductor at one point. As humans are pretty good insulators. Actually, CCS caught. In the midst of bureaucratic chaos and awe, they discovered themselves in possession of tools, pressing buttons, and violating more regulations than they were aware even existed. Power core stability, rising, "That's not supposed to happen," violates at least 16 laws of physics, Pete yelled out. I need something conductive, preferably not radioactive. One of the engineers clumsily offered what looked like a sandwich wrapped in a piece of paper. The engineering team tried their best to follow all of the necessary steps, but it was to no avail. The light stopped pulsating. The menacing buzzing stopped. The power core readouts returned to normal. The power core stability was at 97%, and the artificial intelligence made an announcement that sounded almost disheartened. Otherwise, here lies Gamma-16 would have won the competition, and the crisis would have been avoided. But Tannen left the room surrendered. Crit, who was still clutching a tangle of wires that various warning labels had deemed extremely dangerous, glanced at their tablet, where they had been meticulously documenting everything. Pete tucked the remaining foil into his pocket, just in case, while the chief engineer spoke slowly, suggesting that they might need to update their emergency protocols and include a section on human repair technique. Should I classify this as unauthorized emergency response or miraculous intervention by potentially lethal species? How about Tuesday? Pete suggested, brushing off his hands. Now, who's in for coffee? Saving stations always make me thirsty. The artificial intelligence discreetly added another note to its database of human behavior, warning that species shows a disturbing tendency to treat instances of near-death experiences as opportunities for social interaction. Commander Zixo stood before the classification council, fidgeting nervously as his antenna processed data, attempting to comprehend human logic. It was becoming increasingly clear that the station's psychological support services were working overtime. The point of the bureaucracy, after all, was to make sure that nothing ever happened fast enough to be deemed an emergency. However, here they were, in the midst of an emergency session, all because of one maintenance worker. A holoscreen displayed Pete Thompson's most recent medical scans, which several xenobiologists had already declared to be physiologically impossible and deeply unsettling. Not only did this human survive radiation levels that should have turned him into quantum foam, but he also went on to organize a meeting with the other bureaucrats. High Administrator Vox, whose crystalline form gleamed with barely contained bureaucratic outrage, spoke over the assembled bureaucrats. The witness stand with Star and something called a piñata helped, but several staff members did suffer mild injuries trying to hit it while blindfolded. I also connected the station's artificial intelligence through a comlink. I have compiled 17 incident reports relating to excessive party enthusiasm. I administered a Vox's crystals clouded with confusion, and this was after he had already violated 133 safety protocols. Commander Zix cleared his throat, and Honorable Council agreed that this case clearly demonstrates that our initial classification of humans was incomplete. High Administrator Vox's crystals chimed with skepticism, and we proceeded with caution. The medical scans revealed a brief overlap with next Tuesday, but the humans seemed to view it as a minor inconvenience. The artificial intelligence made the following statement. Cool. I can attend to Taco K&S this week. Zix Tal presented a new holographic display. I have been analyzing data from Station Gamma-16, and I believe that we made a significant error when we assumed that any species that is able to survive extreme conditions must be a predator. However, humans do not survive because they are predatory. Sometimes they need to help others. The display displayed various clips of P teaching maintenance drones to play games, which assisted scientists in overcoming their challenges. A council member chittered that it's absurd that no species evolves purely to help other species. That's right. Spiders fix equipment while telling terrible jokes and finally walk into a radiation-flooded chamber because someone had to. Cricks added their trembling antenna with unexpected confidence. I believe their durability might be directly linked to their hostile conditions, not to hunt, but to protect and assist others. Pete Thompson has been teaching the maintenance staff human repair techniques, showing the medical team human healing practices and introducing various species to something called comfort food, which seems to have mysterious restorative properties. He has also categorized a resistance to coffee, and there are 47 instances of him inconveniencing himself to assist others, including 43 cases where he risked personal harm. The Cricks have continued to share their survival traits. The council room slipped into quiet talks as individuals muttered their ideas, with the odd, astonished gasp or bureaucratic harumph. Vox, the senior administrator, questioned, "Are you saying we need a new categorization entirely?" The commander, Zixer, made a resolute statement along the lines of, "I suggest that we categorize humans as incredibly beneficial survivalists." The phrase, "they are not predators, they are universal support specialists," was proposed by Chris, who requested the addition of a classification for persons who are very pleasant and a warning sign concerning. "We hereby approve the reclassification of humans from extremely lethal predators to extremely helpful survivalists. All stations will be notified of this." One council member added, "Well, yes, Vox agreed they do keep surviving things. It's rather remarkable." The council deliberated for what felt like several geological ages, and finally, High Administrator Vox spoke. Strange things started happening on Gamma-16 when Pete, in honor of his recovery, decided to teach the maintenance drones how to make s'mores. This went against 3 fire safety protocols, but for some reason it was approved as a cultural exchange activity. When Crix informed him about the reclassification, he simply laughed. "So, we're no longer dangerous predators. Instead, you're officially classified as helpful. This is still very concerning, though. There's a new form of documentation for excessive helpfulness bureaucracy that I want to use every time I want to high-five someone." Crick mentioned that their antenna is twitching with amusement, and we're considering changing that as well. Humans have shown us that sometimes breaking protocol is the best protocol. "Now that's progress," Pete grinned, and wanted a small, "I promise it's only slightly toxic," toy. The station's AI made one last note in its daily log update regarding species lethal activity reports. Life on Station Gamma-16 continued, forever altered by the realization that the most dangerous species in the galaxy was also somehow the kindest. However, they did eventually have to ban dad jokes during official meetings, proving that even bureaucracy has its limits. Classification complete humans were still terrifying, but in a nice way. The universe may even be better off because of it. Additionally, they wanted clarification on the proper incident report forms for death by chocolate, which turned out to be less lethal than the name suggests. Stiletto stared dangling through the pictures at the forms he had compiled for witnesses.